So there's a Chucky TV show. It's several seasons in, and like me, you want to watch it but don't know where the movies left off. Well, I couldn't just binge watch all the films and not turn the whole experience into a video, so...
Welcome to ClipNotes.
The Child's Play franchise, or as broader audiences know it, the Chucky movies, is made up of 7 films that are more or less in 3 little groups. First, there's the original trilogy, which is dark, violent, has a single protagonist, and is more or less the same story 3 times. And then there's the gooey comedy center, Bride and Seed, which are basically action comedies that take the story in new directions. And finally, the Renaissance, I guess? Because Curse and Cult are dark, disturbing, and it takes the story in new directions but maintain a single protagonist again. So maybe you want to watch the first movie, clip note your way through 2 and 5, and then finish with a set of films that are progressive and still dark. Or just clip note the whole thing because you hate watching movies for some reason. Or maybe you just want to skip the 2 silly ones. Timestamps are in the description if you want to skip around, so let's get started. Child's Play is a classic slasher horror film directed by Tom Holland, but not that Tom Holland, this Tom Holland. And it is written by him, along with Don Mancini and John Laffey. Charles Lee Ray, or Chucky, later known as Grima Wormtongue, and more importantly, the pervy scientist in Alien Resurrection, is the Lakeshore Strangler, an impeccably dressed serial killer who is gunned down by the man you probably know as Prince Humperdinck, but here at alternate form, he's always gonna be Jack Skellington. I can't do nothing about that. And in a fit of desperation, does a voodoo spell to transfer his soul into a children's toy. It requires the repetition of some French words and some big 80s spooky clouds, but it works. Being on location of a crime scene, the doll is picked up by the homeless and sold to a struggling single mother who gifts it to her son, Andy Barkley. Chucky spends the bulk of the film pretending to be a normal doll, killing anyone who discovers his secret, and manipulating Andy into doing things for him, and eventually escapes on his own so he can visit the man who taught him the original voodoo spell. See, Chucky was only a light voodoo hobbyist, and only now understands that it's for real. He even uses a voodoo doll to murder the guy after finding out the only way he can get his soul out of the doll and into a human is with the same spell, but it has to be the first person he revealed himself to. And if he doesn't do it in time, he will remain a doll forever. So, Chucky goes after Andy, who everyone thinks is lying and going crazy until Chucky kills enough people. And eventually some adults get involved and learn that they need to kill Chucky's heart to stop him, and it gets kinda gruesome. Chucky is shot multiple times, dismembered, burned alive, and finally shot in the heart. This movie has a few down-to-earth characters, a light peppering of voodoo fantasy, which aside from the one spell is totally abandoned in the series. Just like many of the classic 80s slasher films, this movie has a restrained premise that intended to provide commentary on the human condition while giving you a reason to be scared of something seemingly innocuous, like the beach, or camping, or going to sleep. The kid protagonist is surprisingly good and relatable, except for the awful one-liner at the end of the movie.
This is the end, friend.
And it's not the end, because 2 years later, Child's Play 2 is the same movie, but a little bit later, and now it's directed by John Laffey and still written by Don Mancini. And this film picks up with great continuity. The doll looks exactly the same, and the murders have become an urban legend, which has kinda hurt the Good Guy Doll Company, and put Andy in foster care with his mother in a hospital, but not like Sarah Connor hospitalized, more like we'll never see her again, forget she ever existed hospitalized. So in an effort to win the public's trust again, the company weirdly acquired the possessed doll, refurbished it, somehow missing that it had internal organs, and once the eyes go in, he wakes up. Was it the completion of rebuilding the doll? Was it the electricity shortage that woke him up? I don't know. So Andy gets a new foster family, and then Chucky goes after Andy, who everyone thinks is lying and going crazy until Chucky kills enough people. Then his new foster sister, Kyle, gets involved, and they end up in the Good Guy factory for the final showdown where Chucky is dismembered, covered in melted plastic, and then they just blow his head up and leave. The story's a little more complex with more characters. I mean, who are these people? Why are these people? Chucky ends up killing for absolutely no reason instead of vengeance or to hide his identity. It's tonally similar, but a little more light and easy. With the effects and words from the ritual being exactly the same, the doll's appearance getting no updates, and it's just overall a solid continuation of the story. There's just nothing new. It's just what happens next. What happens next? Child's Play 3 is yet another slasher horror film, but this time directed by Jack Ben Bender just some TV guy who swooped in, but Don Mancini is still writing. Let's see how that works out. So the company just took Chucky's goop and they poured it into a big goop puddle and they just made him again. He's not complete, but he wakes up. So much for eyeballs and electricity. It's 8 years later, but not actual 8 years later, because this movie came out less than a year after part 2. So Andy is suddenly a teenager, and he's been put in military school, which is exactly where Chucky gets himself so that he can try to possess Andy again. But as soon as he gets there, he realizes he has a new body now, and he needs to possess a different person who he first revealed himself to. New body, same material though. Is he right about this? I don't know. But man, they are consistent with this ritual. And then, oh, what happens? Oh, Chucky goes after Tyler and Andy, who everyone thinks is lying and going crazy until Chucky kills enough people. There's this one cool scene where the kids are playing war games and Chucky is manipulating them via walkie-talkie. That's different, but yeah. Some other students get involved and they end up at a county fair for the final showdown where Chucky gets his face sliced off and then he's shredded by a big fan. Yeah, that ought to do it. That's it. I mean, it's 8 years later for no reason other than to make Andy older, but then there's a kid involved again anyway. Chucky's used for a couple of laughs a few times, but overall it's the same movie again. I mean, if he has no reason to track down Andy, the plot could have been different, but the repetitive storyline of these movies makes sense in a world where it took some effort to obtain a home video and the sequels came out only every couple of years. Now in the age of the binge watch, it's kind of pointless and doesn't go anywhere. So let's go somewhere! Child's Play 4? Nope. This is just Bride of Chucky. Bride of Chucky is a goofy, massively 90s action comedy still written by Don Mancini but directed by Hong Kong action comedy director Ronnie Yu. Now it's actually been 8 years in the real world, so has it been 1 year or 8 years since the last movie? It doesn't matter! And instead of kicking off with Andy, we got Tiffany Valentine, Chucky's former girlfriend, fellow serial killer, white trash goth bombshell, who obtains the remains of the shredded Chucky doll and puts him back together herself, giving Chucky his first visual upgrade and does a slightly different version of the ritual? Did this even bring him back, or was it just putting him together that did it? And we take the hard left turn. Who the fuck are these people, and why are we being introduced to them? Well, it's so that 30 minutes into the movie, they can finally get involved in the story. And the story is Chucky and Tiffany fight, and they make up a lot, and part of that involves him killing her and transferring her soul into a girl doll, then manipulating these teenagers into transporting the dolls to Chucky's grave so that he can use this amulet to transfer themselves into new human bodies. This time he doesn't even need a first revealed to human because there is an amulet that can do it on command. And Chucky was wearing it when he died, except he wasn't, and Charles Lee Ray wasn't that into or aware of voodoo. But now he's an amulet wearing expert, sure. Chucky and Tiffany go after the amulet with these teenagers who everyone thinks is lying and going crazy until Chucky and Tiffany kill enough people. Cops get involved and Chucky is stabbed and shot a few times. Not only would this not kill him, it wouldn't even knock him out for very long. Tiffany, on the other hand, is burned alive, doesn't die, and gives birth to a toothy hellspawn. That's it. This was a big genre shift away from slasher to comedy action, complete with explosions, pop culture references, lovable villains, chases, rock music, shitty props, bad acting,
Pooh, something really stinks in here.
and short-sighted retcons, which isn't a good continuation, but I guess it's a good action comedy. Did someone say action comedy? Seed of Chucky is a parody film in which longtime writer Don Mancini finally dethroned enough directors that for the first time he's in the big seat, and what did he do with all that power? So Chucky and Tiffany's baby was picked up by a crappy British ventriloquist who abused the poor nameless doll. And not just nameless, he has no knowledge of his roots until he sees Chucky and Tiffany on the news because somehow a movie is being made about Chucky and Tiffany with totally new but identical dolls. I don't know about this. And this premise lets them bring back Jennifer Tilly, I guess because they realized that part of her appeal was visual. And she plays herself, an actress meant to play Tiffany in the movie that they're making. And then Redman, who is a rapper nobody remembers, is making a Bible movie. And the most disappointing thing about this series 5 movies in is that the voodoo aspect is just a bump in the road on the way to get Chucky talking again, rather than being expanded on. Just contradict it and leave it behind. Because all of a sudden the amulet has writing on the back of it, so just anyone can read it and do a soul transfer. Even though the original Chucky of 4 films was merely shot one time and left in an open grave in Jersey, only a few feet away from Tiffany, who also was not dead, just reading this amulet transfer their souls into these new bodies because someone and read the back of it near similar looking dolls. Then, when Chucky's kid reveals they have no gender or genitalia, the story is focused on the new parents vowing to take over Redman and Jennifer's babies, and then go straight while their kid tries to decide on a gender, choosing between the identities of Glenn or Glenda. That's another pop culture reference. They kill a bunch of people, and Chucky has this revelation that he'd rather stay a doll, though his reasoning makes no sense when he says that becoming a human is too complicated, even though that's a problem only a possessed doll would have. So Chucky is dismembered with an axe, and that's it. No biggie for him, but I guess he's dead. Tiffany becomes Jennifer Tilly. The kid gets his personality split into two gender-opposed twins, and they live a happy life for 5 years until Chucky's arm shows up and kills them all, I guess? I don't know. This flick is a full-blown comedy with pointless nudity, dumb sex jokes, Britney Spears gets blown up, and even the movie's plot is a little self-contradictory because the whole thing with Chucky having to impregnate Jennifer Tilly makes no sense. I don't know. If you like the scary movies, then you'll like this movie. It's also impossible to segue from this one into the next one, but... Did someone say impossible segue? Curse of Chucky is an unsettling horror mystery bafflingly written and directed by Don Mancini again. It has a far calmer intro and, yes, more characters we know nothing about, and if 4 and 5 were devoid entirely of human drama, and the original trilogy had some human drama, Part 6 is loaded with human drama. Half the movie is Chucky quietly sitting in a corner while this Agatha Christie-style mystery unfolds among a few family members in a decaying mansion. Anyway, we're introduced to a paraplegic, Nika Pierce, who is played by Fiona Dourif, the real-life daughter of Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky. But more importantly, she was awesome, and Dirk, gently go watch that real quick. Chucky, right. So apparently, retconning before he died, he was friends with the Pierce family, fell in love with and kidnapped the mom, who he kept in a basement under the delusion that they were going to be a family. Until the police showed up, he killed her, paralyzing her unborn child, and then was gunned down minutes later. That's the backstory of the film, not the story of it. But it's the only important part. It's also kind of weird, like, does Tiffany even exist anymore? And I didn't mention it before because it didn't seem important at the time that he had a partner with him that night, and man, it really doesn't seem important now. Anyway, Chucky goes after Nika, the aforementioned paralyzed baby, who everyone thinks is lying and going crazy until Chucky kills enough people, and then the courts are positive she's lying and crazy. And she's sent away to prison. He is stolen by a cop and then stolen by Jennifer Tilly, still possessed by Tiffany, who mails him to Nika's niece, Alex. And he finally manages to get his soul into a human body. It kind of marks a renaissance in the franchise, as it doesn't really return to its slasher roots, but it goes in a new horror film direction. And even though this dark, disturbing horror film has its own tone and is a totally new storyline, all of that is picked up and continued in the next film. Cult of Chucky is a continuation of Curse of Chucky. It's written and directed by Don Mancini again, who actually seems like he's building something new, but keeps his eye on that old stuff. See, because this starts off with old Andy Barclay, and not that Andy, who just can't get through a date without his past coming back to haunt him. Speaking of haunted, Andy has Chucky's disembodied head chained to a block of wood back home. This is not explained in this movie at all. So, no, wait. Okay, back in part 6, after he possessed Alex, there was a post-credit scene of him being mailed to Andy, who was ready for him and shot him in the face. Meanwhile, Nika is locked up in a minimal security, hyper-stylized asylum, and she's convinced that she did commit the murders. The shrink has a Chucky doll, and the good guy voice is different for the first time after 6 films.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. I like to be hugged. I like to be hugged.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
And then Tiffany, using her real name, no longer posing as Jennifer Tilly, and showing no signs of remorse for her 2 children, who I guess were murdered by Chucky off camera? Where was I? Oh, she just shows up with another good guy doll and says that she was Alex's caretaker, and that Alex is now dead. This being Nika's only living relative, it's pretty upsetting to her, along with the growing number of good guy dolls around her in an insane asylum. And, well, Chucky found a new spell that lets him transfer his soul into multiple bodies and multiple dolls. And wouldn't you know it, it's the same 4 words as the spell in every movie, with an increased lack of interesting visuals. So anyway, Chucky kills a bunch of people, Andy shows up to save the day but just gets himself locked up, and Nika gets possessed with Chucky's soul and just leaves with Tiffany. That's the end of the whole franchise. Oh, but then there's a post-credit scene. Andy's foster sister Kyle shows up out of nowhere and tortures Chucky's head because Andy sent her?
Andy sent me.
Sure. And that's the end of the Child's Play movie franchise. It was also rebooted a few years later, but in that he was just a badly programmed robot that killed people. This series did plenty of genre shifts, repeats, expansions, contradictions, and a few character sidesteps, which is all weird since it had the same writer all the way through and the same director for half the films. We never see what happened with the teen survivors from Part 4, nor do we hear from Tyler or the other military school kids who survived Part 3. We just have to assume that the Tilly twins were murdered, and the original Chucky, who lasted 4 films, was just abandoned for this movie prop that's going on a killing spree. It's kind of a mess, but it seems like aside from a few players being picked up along the way, the main narrative currently is the one started with Curse of Chucky. But who knows where the franchise will go from here.